The ANC concluded its nominations tally in the early hours of this morning. Dr. Zuma declining nomination for presidency, Lindiwe Sisulu failing to meet nomination threshold from the floor, and David Mabuza declining nomination for the deputy president position. The ANC also resolving to add an additional position, which would be the second deputy secretary general post, which is currently being contested by Marupeni Ramaphosa and Ronalda Nalumango. However, one of the other most pressing issues, at least according to many, surrounding the governing party, is that former President Jacob Zuma and the incumbent Cyril Ramaphosa, of course, locked in some kind of legal tussle. Let's make sense of all of this for you now. Bring in political analyst Professor Sethulego Matebesi live to us via our video link once again this Sunday morning. Prof, it's lovely to see you. Thanks very much indeed for making time to speak to us. So much to speak about. So perhaps let's begin with what's being described this morning as the surprise moves from what's taken place into the nomination process yesterday, well into the early hours of this morning. Lindiwe, Zuma and David Mabuza seemingly throwing in the towel by declining their nominations. Are these people who are perhaps jumping before being pushed out?
Hi, good morning, Ayanda, and good morning to the viewers. For me, what really stood out, it's not so much Dr. Zuma, because I knew, most commentators knew that she will not stand a chance against Lindiwe and Ramaphosa, Cyril Ramaphosa. But for Lindiwe Sisulu, who I strongly believe that since February this year has been setting the tone, she was hailed as the so-called anti-Ramaphosa camp, and once again, just to indicate that politics sometimes is a highly emotive game, but at the end of the day, you also need to know how to play that particular game. And I think it was a huge disappointment for her, because she could not even muster 25% of the delegates. But it's not surprising. David Mabuza, he knows that it is actually payback time for what happened during the previous round. But Dr. Zuma, that was a calculated move, a clever move. As I've indicated, she just knew that once you have not been nominated, it's very difficult, unlike in a few cases where people have been nominated from the floor and made that threshold of 25%. For her, it was going to be very difficult.
Yeah. Before we make sense of these other developments, I wonder what you make of these individuals' political futures. I'm talking about Zuma and Lindiwe Sisulu, given what they said even about the president in the lead-up to this race. Do you reckon they might have to pay for that when it comes to, I don't know, cabinet reshuffles on the other side of this particular conference? Or is it all love and fair in war?
It was a clever move from President Cyril Ramaphosa to include someone who competed with him in his cabinet, but it will be a huge surprise, because remember, President Cyril Ramaphosa, there's a likelihood that he will not complete, if he does get elected, his second term. And people like Dr. Zuma, Lindiwe Sisulu have openly, publicly, demonstrated that they do not condone of his leadership. And I strongly believe that those are definitely people that will not come back, and if they do come back, then for me it will be political suicide on the side of President Cyril Ramaphosa, because you can extend a hand to those who are against you for the sake of unity, but sometimes also you cannot have people who openly disregard and disrespect you, because that is also not good, not only for Cyril Ramaphosa, but for the African National Congress. So my prediction is I can't see how Lindiwe Sisulu will come back, maybe out of her own accord, but definitely also President Cyril Ramaphosa's hands will be forced not to include her in a cabinet should he be elected for a second term.
Sure. Let's stay with Lindiwe Sisulu for a while. It's interesting how you mentioned that Dr. Zuma's decision not to stand for nomination was a calculated one, because already as of this morning, people are saying that Lindiwe Sisulu's decision to stand for that nomination was woefully miscalculated. One of many miscalculations she's made, we're told, in the lead-up to this particular conference. To what extent do you agree with that?
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. I'm actually very disappointed because it's a similar approach that the youth within the African National Congress it's following, where you pick somebody to criticize, and that is your agenda, your entire political agenda. And this is what Lindiwe Sisulu have been doing the entire year. There's nothing wrong to criticize, but you should also be aware that you might have ardent supporters who will not disagree with the way to which she has been actually attracting, almost causing severe reputational damage for her own organizations. You criticizes the organization to such an extent, but yet you are aspiring for a leadership position. What is going to happen after you have been elected? And these are some of the things that I strongly believe that played against her. She's very vocal, which is fine, but at the end of the day, you also need to demonstrate ethical leadership and not just criticize when it suits you. Where were the Lindiwe Sisulus, the Dr. Nkosazana Zumas, the Zweli Mkhize's of this world during the former President Jacob Zuma's, reign? And these are the questions that a lot of people will ask, not only ANC members, but I strongly believe that her approach was a wrong approach, and on several occasions. I mean, like the other day that she has been locked out at Parliament, almost trying to make a statement that the so-called Cyril Ramaphosa camp or NEC have locked her out. It's pronouncements like that where you need to show leadership instead of just criticizing your opponents within the African National Congress.
Yeah. It's also difficult to not pick up that the two quote-unquote leading ladies in this entire presidential race are now officially out of that race. I mean, from the last time I checked, the only posts where they are woman nominated is in the Deputy Secretary General position, which we now know has been split into two. There's a first DSG and a second DSG, and in both instances, it's only women nominated there. But I mean, a serious blow to these calls within the governing party for there to be serious efforts placed into ensuring that there's some kind of 50-50 gender parity. I think we're further away from that than we were in the last conference.
Yeah, most definitely. I thought that if it worked out, that perhaps during the 2017 elective conference, Dr. Nkosazana Zuma would vie for the deputy president, then she would have stood, and women in general, a chance to become the president. Well, it's for the very first time because David Mabuza is now out of reckoning. So it will be for the first time where you don't have that transition from deputy president. We all know it's not automatic. It's a democratic process, but it's sad because now there's a possibility that out of the top 7 there might be 3 women. But we all know that if you look at the ANC treasurer position where Bejani and Pulemabi will come up against when Ramaphosa, who I strongly believe that it is a very formidable candidate. So, and I think from her side, was also a very calculated move when she rejected a nomination for the position of a Deputy Secretary General, because she already knew that you've got 2 women there, Jumet and Menombula Nokonyana. So for me, once again, it shows you, unlike the Lindiwe Sisulus of this world, I don't want to blame her for every single little thing, but sometimes you need to take calculated, not risk as such, but decisions in politics, because within a split second, what happened yesterday or 5 years ago over the past couple of months can be derailed within a split second at an elective conference. And I think because she has been nominated twice from the floor, rejecting one and accepting one was a clever move to say, but I stand a chance for the ANC Treasurer General, because there aren't any women nominees but it is definitely a long shot for women gender parity within the African National Congress and also intergenerational move, except for Ofikile Mbalula and Olamola, who some still believe that they are representing the youth. Yeah.
That's exactly what I was about to say. I mean, anyway, let's not be spicy. Speaking about calculated moves, there's also this, shall we call it a sideshow, with the legal tussle between President Cyril Ramaphosa and his predecessor, Jacob Zuma. I mean, yesterday there was a letter in response to the letter, if you're able to keep up, around whether or not this private prosecution is even legal or legitimate to begin with. The Jacob Zuma Foundation adamant that, in fact, the summons, the purported summons that are going to pave the way for this private prosecution are, in fact, legitimate. I wonder to what extent you reckon delegates are being swayed by what's taken place, insofar as this is concerned.
No, not at all. I mean, the KwaZulu-Natal and the anti-Cyril Ramaphosa delegates will be emboldened by what I believe. I'm not a legal guru, but for me it's a very desperate move, and it should be dismissed in its entirety. It's just unacceptable, and it once again gives us a window into dangerous leadership battles within the African National Congress. But these things sometimes may win battles, short-term battles, the singing, the heckling and all that for the African National Congress. But believe me, we are a couple of months away from a national elections. And these kind of things just damages the image of the African National Congress. I mean, later today, President Cyril Ramaphosa may not even be re-elected, but at the end of the day, some of these things will linger into the minds of many South Africans. And it's just very unfortunate where South African leaders and in many parts of the world do not understand when to say, but I had my opportunity, let me leave those who are lead and those who can potentially take the organization forward an opportunity to do so peacefully. And for me, it's a sad moment, not only for the African National Congress, but also for South Africa and Africa in its entirety.
Do you reckon it is just about power? I mean, it was Vincent Magonya who tweeted, I think it was on the first day of conference, that what we're seeing now is more than just a contestation for influence within a political movement. It's been reduced to what I think he described as personal hatred that might cost this country. And, you know, often perhaps this is even the media's fault. We've characterized what's taken place in the ANC as these, I guess, you know, individualistic wars between people, more than, you know, this kind of more broader tussle for influence in the governing party with an objective of taking the party in a certain direction.
Yes, Ayanda, it's a higher stakes game. There are too much at stake currently. And maybe after the next two elective conferences, there is a possibility for the ANC to find itself where the center will hold a very strong to the house. But at the current moment, it's almost like it's a tit for tat, where, I mean, we all know for the very first time a democratically elected former president has been in prison, and that happened during the era of President Cyril Ramaphosa. And now it's almost like it's time to revenge, and the so-called Arthur Fraser game have not made enough damage from the so-called parity forces. And I think this was a large attempt from President Cyril Ramaphosa. But for me, it definitely goes deeper. I mean, I'm from the Free State, and there has been also rumors, allegations that, you know, the Free State delegates were almost physically trying to assault one another. And these are the kind of things that one asks yourself, if a delegate leaves his or her home to go to an elective conference, one of the highest decision-making processes of the African National Congress, and want to strangle, a fellow party member, will they not be capable to do the same? to completely strangers, ordinary South African citizens. And unfortunately, these are the lessons that ANC members have not yet learned. And as I've indicated, there are too much at stake. Some ANC members are facing jail. Some of them, we've seen the suspended Secretary General almost like holding a mini rally outside of Nasrec. It has been unheard of. And he's continuing having a gripe and at the current incumbent president. So all these kind of things tells you that there are too much at stake and people just don't want to give in. They want to fight this up until the end.
Sure. Really interesting. I wonder at what cost. Professor Sethulego Matebesi, always great getting your insights there. Something tells me we'll be in conversation soon as we continue watching the story unfold. Professor Matebesi, a political analyst, live just there from Bloemfontein in the Free State. When we come back.